Hello class, welcome to today's lesson on key training principles. And today we're going to look at some of the principles of training. Now you can see by the graphic that we're going to use the mnemonic SPORT. S stands for specificity, P for progression, O for overload, R for reversibility, and T for tedium. We're actually going to add another R for rest and recovery. So let's look at each of these components in a little more detail. So our first principle of training is specificity. Now, if you think about it, it wouldn't make any sense for a football player to run for miles every day, and it wouldn't make any sense for a soccer player to practice heavy explosive movements because they're not really using those sports. So specificity, we're designing our training to meet the needs of the sport and our bodies. And on the graphic, you can see some more examples of different types of specificity. The next principle of training we have is overload. And overload is where we increase greater than normal the load that we're used to doing. So it forces our muscles to, or our body to adapt to the new load. And you can see in the picture, that's actually Milo of Croton. He was a 6-time Olympic champion wrestler back in the ancient games in Greece. And what he did for 4 years, he lifted a calf as it grew from the calf all the way up to a bull. And that helped him get stronger because he was increasing the overload. And overload is usually used with the FIT principle, meaning that we usually increase one of the things, either frequency, intensity, or time. The next principle of training is the principle of progression. And progression works closely with overload because what you're doing is you're gradually increasing that overload. So think of a staircase. You're slowly moving up the staircase. And what that does, it allows us to recover because we're moving up slowly. So we have time for our body to recover and grow. And then also, since we're moving slowly, we reduce the chance of injury. So again, progression is an important component to go along with overload. The next principle of training we have is reversibility, and you can see Thomas Jefferson summarizes it quickly with use it or lose it. So what happens is, let's say I'm training for 6 months and my body's made all these adaptations, training's going well, and then I take 2 months off. Well, I'm going to lose those adaptations that I gained during those 6 months. And I see that all the time during class when students are in their off season, their sport. Sometimes their fitness testing results go down because they're in the off season. So this is why off season training is extremely important. Another important principle of training is rest and recovery. This sometimes gets overlooked because people think, okay, I'm going to spend more time in the gym and work out to get better. But if you don't include times of rest, your body can't recover, repair itself, and you're not going to make gains. You're going to have some overtraining problems and some different situations. So it's important that you get enough sleep, you take breaks between workouts, okay, and you listen to your body and realize when there are times where you need to step back and take a day or two off. The last training principle, tedium, can arise when you don't put enough variety into your training programs. And I kind of laugh at this because when I'm dealing with my kids, they'll say, hey, Daddy, I'm bored. And I always say, that's your fault. Because it is your fault, because you really have to go out there and do some activities and try some different things, try some different training in your program, and that'll help prevent tedium. Now that we've examined all the different principles of training, let's look at some principles of sports training. And one of the principles for that is transfer. Now you can see in the picture, the guy's training in the weight room, he's throwing a medicine ball, and that transfers for him throwing the shot put. So it's important for team sports for athletes to participate in some different types of sports because some sports have similar skills. And the example I have on there is football and wrestling. When you tackle and you take somebody down in wrestling, they're similar skills. So you can work muscles in different ways and it can help you be better. A second principle of sports training is variation. And this is also called periodization. And what that is designing programs throughout the year. So that means that my in-season and off-season training is going to be a little different, a little more intense, a little more volume, a little less volume. And it's usually designed by macrocycles, which are yearly plan, And the mesocycles are down to your weekly and monthly plan. Another principle of sports training is balance. And what we're doing here is we're making sure that our training has proper proportions, meaning that we're going to work on the physical side, the mental side, different types of training within. As you see in the graphic, different types of athletes will need a different balance, physical, mental, technical balance. And the key here is that we do all things in moderation. So you don't want to overtrain, which are going to help us be successful and get good results and also reduce the chance of injury. So remember, we're going to use the acronym SPORT, which stands for specificity, progression, overload, reversibility, rest and recovery, and tedium. And there's also some principles that apply to sports training, like transfer, balance, variation. But I want you to think about how can you use these principles in your activity. So in your sport activity, how can you use these to help your performance, help you be better? Our next lesson, we're going to look at more in depth in the FIT principle and how we can help us plan our workouts and help get good results.